Hi guys, welcome to the HGR Digital Asset Group podcast series, where we interview thought leaders in the crypto space. Today, we're very fortunate to have Chris Robichaud. I'm not sure how to say that name. Am I saying that correctly, or how do I?
It's pretty close. It's okay. It's Chris Robichaud.
Okay, Chris Robichaud.
Robichaud, like a show. Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. So, Chris, I'm very excited to have you today. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Chris, can you tell us briefly about your background and how, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and I saw that you used to be a manager at Deloitte, and obviously I have a lot of respect for Big Four professionals, having worked at EY myself. And I was just curious, like, what made you move from the traditional finance space to the crypto space?
Yeah, sure thing. So I can give you a quick intro on where I've come from. So I spent 6 years at Deloitte, primarily in the investment management industry, helping clients in the investment management space, and kind of a broad group of clients, from hedge funds to pension funds to endowments to investment managers to family offices and whatnot. Think about how to mitigate the different risks that they face, across the spectrum. So financial, operational, regulatory, technology, and strategic types of risk. So it was there was never really a dull day. I was always doing something different, and I feel like I got a lot of great exposure to what the financial services industries were facing with regard to risks. And as part of that process, as part of that growth that I experienced there, what I started to do was to write a lot of things about where the industry was going. And so, with that in mind, a lot of the things that I came across, particularly towards the end of my tenure at Deloitte, were themes related to how technology is transforming the financial services industries. And so with that type of background, I started to focus on fintech more specifically, and started to, once I left Deloitte, came to Columbia Business School and started to really focus on some of the verticals within fintech that were interesting to me, because I really did feel like millennials are just now coming into their own as people who are worrying about their finances, something that they hadn't done in the past. And so I felt like the financial services industry is really at the beginning of a technology revolution. I think a lot of people think this, by the way. The financial services industry is really at the beginning of a technological revolution that is being driven by the fact that millennials are not just now beginning to pay attention to long-term financial goals. So I felt like this is a good place to play in. And that's what I've been studying ever since I joined Columbia Business School. And I've kind of taken a couple of routes to exploring financial services with regard to that. And the crypto and blockchain space probably has been the most deep portion of the industry that I've focused on.
Got it. That's a pretty interesting background. I think, first of all, I have a lot of respect for guys who go to Columbia Business School. I have a lot of friends there, and my dad actually graduated from CBS like a while back. So it's obviously an awesome school. You're in New York at the heart of the financial industry. And I totally agree with your point on how technology is transforming financial services. I think one quick heuristic is, if you look at the number of software engineers that Goldman Sachs hires, I think they have more engineers than Facebook, at least in 2015 or 2016. So I think software engineers comprise at least 1/3 of Goldman Sachs' workforce, and some people think that eventually financial services will keep on hiring these software engineers, and ultimately financial services platforms will be mostly software solutions, not necessarily human services anymore. So yeah, pretty interesting thoughts from you, Chris. So my next question is, I think when you're at an MBA, it's a very pivotal time in your life, because you get to rethink your priorities and maybe venture out of your traditional background. And it looks like you've been doing that with your company, BitRights. BitRights, I've read you guys were selected for the Consensus Blockchain MBA venture competition, and you guys are funded by pretty solid groups like the NYC Economic Development Corporation and Mayor's Office. Can you tell us more about what your company does?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's been about 8 months since we've started BitRights, and it's been a wild ride, but it's been a lot of fun. So, we did start off in large part because of a blockchain competition that Consensus put on related to finding ideas and innovation within the space. So I think one of the things that is pretty true about the blockchain space is that a lot of technologists have been focusing on it for quite some time now, a decade or more. But business people are relatively new to the space. I think you see a lot of that being reflected in some of the mania that you saw in Q4 of 2017 with regard to how people were treating ICOs and how cryptocurrency prices were skyrocketing. But I think in general, this type of thing is part of the world that we are entering as BitRights, the company. And BitRights, the company, what we do is we attempt to make digital licensing and rights management easier for content creators. The goal, I think, for our company is to really help content creators capture more of the value that they're creating. And we envision a world that inspires and protects original artistic expression, which is particularly difficult in today's day and age when you have problems like so many distribution channels on the internet. It's really hard for artists to track things that are floating around so many niche areas on the internet. You have so many intermediaries within media and entertainment, lawyers and talent agents and many parties in between there that my co-founder could speak more eloquently to as the founder of the previous founder of a electronic record label. But the point is there's a lot of them out there, so it's hard because content creators kind of have to pay for a lot of that intermediary interaction. There's the nature of content today. The way people consume content is very different than it was 10 years ago. A lot of content that people consume today is on platforms like Instagram, and a piece of content that's monetizable today may not be monetizable tomorrow. So you really have to have an infrastructure that exists to help people capture value related to their content today, because if you don't, that's going to be lost revenue pretty soon. And then also, IP infringement is a real big issue for the industry, and a lot of people have solutions to it, but they're not all the way effective sometimes. And so we're working on solutions to help monitor as well instances of IP infringement. And I think the last thing that we're looking to do is to help integrate all of this into a more easily usable system for the content creators. Some of these solutions exist. Some of our competitors are doing this, in more of a siloed mechanism. We're trying to streamline it all because it's not easy to do. And that's kind of the way that we are structuring our approach to BitRights.
What types of digital products do you work with? Is it mostly music, film, like even photography, or is it all of these?
Yeah, we're trying to remain agnostic to the type of file or the type of content that our digital rights management solution will help with. I think especially when you're a young startup like us, we'll have to pick an area first, right? Because you can't boil the ocean and expect to have any good results. But for the time being, we're going to play in one or two areas, and being cognizant of the vast variety of types of digital content and different industries within media and entertainment. There is some competition, so we're going to have to try and carve out a niche strategy, which we've been working very hard on internally to hammer out and trying to find that balance to succeed.
Okay, that sounds good. From my understanding, I can think of your competition in two main buckets. One is the current industry incumbents. So I could be wrong, but I guess in this bucket, we would be talking about the current internet-based solutions, so maybe Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, SoundCloud, those types of digital content providers. And then on the second bucket, blockchain-based or new technology-based solutions that are trying to solve the same problem that you guys are solving. How do you guys view the competitors, and what competitive advantage do you think you have over them?
Yeah, good question. So, there are, I think that the blockchain solution is a relatively new concept for media and entertainment rights management, but there certainly are some players in that industry to date, and they're not small in number, right? There's a lot of them. But what's interesting about that side of the competitive market you're talking about is that there's not really a real big incumbent yet, right? It's still a little bit like the Wild West, and people are trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, how to make your product win in a market where there is no incumbent yet. But clearly there's a need because solutions like BitRights and our competitors keep popping up. So we're working on differentiating ourselves on a few key areas in that realm. In the other realm, so if you just think about so you spoke about platforms a little bit. So Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, maybe those are a few examples. Certainly those are centralized platforms that are very much incumbents and would be very difficult to overcome in terms of being a distribution channel. I like to think of our strategy a little bit different from being just a distribution channel. I think we'd like to be a content rights management and licensing platform first. Who knows what the long-term vision for our company will hold. We're working on that. But, there are a lot of considerations to your point about when you compete with large platforms, how do you overcome that, network effect that they've created with regard to their platform? So we're working on different ways to figure out how to partner with people in the industry, because we feel like using the immutable and censorship-resistant nature of the blockchain, that is real value add, that when you combine it with other types of distribution platforms and different infrastructure that exists within the digital content industry today, that's a powerful connection. And no one's really figured out or built what the perfect solution is yet. I think it's a matter of time. But we have some ideas, and we think that we can execute on them pretty well. So that's a couple thoughts on both of those platforms.
So how do you guys make money exactly? Like, what's your revenue model?
Yeah. So, I think in terms of our business model, we are, and I would just preface it by saying we've been working on the technology for the most part to date, just hammering out the plans for making it actually useful to a customer. Because if you don't really have we've done over 120 customer interviews to date related to what are the pain points in the industry, what are the real things that you care about? Is it really that you need a blockchain record of your digital media, or do you want to solve a few other things using that blockchain record, which, because it's blockchain, makes things a little bit more transparent, a little bit more, a little bit faster, a little bit more trustable, right? That's kind of the base layer of data quality that the blockchain provides, which may not exist in a lot of areas of digital media today, that we'll be able to improve. So that's from a product standpoint. But you asked about revenue model. So revenue model for us, we've been considering a few things. We want to make it useful for the customer, so we want to make a lot of this free, and have a freemium type model whereby you may have power users or enterprise users that would link into our technology and use it more than just the occasional, Instagram user who has taken a viral video and wants to try to monetize that quickly. So, the short answer is freemium subscription model, whereby some portion of our services will be free, some portion will be, attributable to a pro user, monthly subscription, and some at the enterprise level. We've also played around with some some type of transaction fees, because we do hope that our platform will facilitate licensing and transactions. So with that, our platform having facilitated those transactions, we'd like to take, or we've considered taking, a percentage of the sale that occurs on the platform. So those are kind of the two ways we've had in mind to make some money, and still working on the perfect mix.
Got it. I feel like that's a pretty smart plan. One more question about the market that you guys are trying to solve. So you mentioned that I guess piracy and duplication of content is something that we're really having trouble with today with the internet. I've read some studies actually about how piracy can actually improve a brand or a specific show. For example, I think I read an article like a few years back on how HBO actually knows that people are downloading Game of Thrones and all their good shows in Pirate Bay or other torrent sites, but they actually don't care, because that's a form of viral marketing for them, and it can indirectly translate into higher revenues, whether it's someone eventually buying an HBO subscription or someone buying merchandise for Game of Thrones that is directly related to the other cash flow streams that they can take in. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like piracy can actually be a double-edged sword, and is there really a need to create more security measures for digital creators?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think certainly a company as large as HBO, with the revenues that they generate, can afford some level of piracy and even call it marketing. So yeah, that point is well taken. I would say when you're thinking about the smaller people, right, the small to mid-size talent agency that has artists who are not well known yet, or maybe a D-list type of celebrity in whatever field, music. Those types of people really can't afford to have content pirated if it could be monetizable. They're more of the type of person, or the type of people that we're trying to help, I guess, most directly, are the type of people who need and rely on their content that they put out there to put food on their table and things like that. So certainly that's one aspect. I would also say that I've heard from many customers that there's almost this sense of helplessness that they have related to digital content, right? Particularly in the journalism area. Spoken to many journalists who say things like, we just want to get people to read our stuff, and we're there's no way we can stop piracy, so I'm just not going to worry about it. It's kind of an assumption that those customers make that revenue's gone, but it's just a cost to them of doing business. Well, at BitRights, we're trying to challenge that assumption a little bit and say, what if we can figure out a better way to help you capitalize on some of that value you're losing while other people are stealing your work? Certainly that applies to several different industries in media and entertainment, and I do think that it is still a large problem for a lot of people. Perhaps the big media players don't feel it as much, but we see it as a problem. We've heard it from many people.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think the journalism example is a great one. And the way that I like to think about it now is a lot of people will write for Forbes and, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Huffington Post, and they don't really see that as a real job, because they know that there's no money involved. Rather, it's a platform for them to gain credibility and maybe use that to source more opportunities where they can actually earn money. But I could be wrong. I'm not a journalist, and I don't know exactly how journalists think. But I do agree that well, I guess there's like less and less money for journalists just because it's really hard to monetize articles unless your core product is something like Bloomberg, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to monetize, especially if you don't have the proper controls in place to or the platform, right? If you don't have the platform up and running, I think Spotify does a great job of this. Actually, they have a platform. They figured out a way to protect songs on their platform, and so they've done a pretty good job of helping to prevent piracy by the technology that they've built into their files and their songs. Not everyone can do that though, and so that's where we're trying to step in helping in other ways.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, helping the smaller guys, as you said, and maybe hopefully branch onto something bigger. That makes perfect sense, right? Starting from a niche and then working your way up. So, do you think that I have a broader question, not just related to the digital media space? Do you think that large companies and industry incumbents are taking blockchain seriously? Like in the news, there's a lot of media coverage on large companies like IBM, Amazon, and other companies that are supposedly using or playing with blockchain technology. Do you feel like these are serious efforts by these companies, or are they just marketing and public relations stunts without real intent?
That's a good question. I think generally the types of companies that you've talked about, like Amazons and Googles and Facebooks, they've all done their research on blockchain. I think one of the conclusions they've likely come to, because I haven't seen too many public things done by those companies with regard to blockchain. I think Amazon is starting to think about its own cryptocurrency. I read something about that. But most of the time, the blockchain is used to help solve a trust problem, right? If you don't have a trust problem within your platform, then the blockchain really isn't going to help you that much, in my opinion.
Yep.
It's a very specific type of issue that a lot of people who hear the buzzwords of blockchain and decentralized databases and things like that don't really think or understand. So if we think about that type of core problem that it solves related to trust, and then you think about the type of institution that you're speaking about, so it's like a large centralized institution, there's really not that much use in my mind for blockchain technology at the company, right? Because Googles and Facebooks, they take, people trust them with their data, whether they should or shouldn't, right? They trust them with their data, and the blockchain is a way to establish trust in some way. Well, it's almost like a restriction to have blockchain integrated into your systems because it's like an audit trail, right? So is that really beneficial to a company like Google or Facebook, who can only be by using blockchain in their systems? Maybe they could say, yeah, we're a little more secure. Yeah, you could trust us a little better. But really, how does that help them? It's really a restriction. It's really putting them in on the defense with regards to how they're managing their data. It's not something they've got to worry about, because data, if they put blockchain into their systems, now all of a sudden that data is not going anywhere and it can't be changed. It's always auditable. So it's almost like a catch-22. So that's my position on why larger centralized tech companies maybe haven't been picking up all of the blockchain technology solutions that you see startups doing yet. Potentially they'll find a way to make it more useful, and certainly there are some that are experimenting. But I think when it comes down to it, that's kind of the long and short of it. It's not that useful to them.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, and I completely agree with what you're saying. You said that in a very eloquent way, and I couldn't agree more. The next question that I have is related to what some of the challenges currently in the blockchain space, especially with regards to scalability. So I talked to a lot of people who have done ICOs and on the Ethereum blockchain, and one of the common ideas, or one of the common themes, is that the less scalable Ethereum is, then the less effective these apps will be, or decentralized apps will be. as well. So do you think that the scaling should be a problem that only Ethereum should try to solve, or should dApp people who develop dApps try to solve this? Like, is it their responsibility? And do you think that dApp developers will start to take on this responsibility, or would they just push it to the Ethereum folks?
Yeah, so, in my mind, you build the infrastructure first, and after you build the infrastructure, then you can build like applications on top of it. And I know that a lot of the smartest people in the blockchain space today are working on scalability. They're working at Ethereum, they're working on, the Raiden network, they're working on Plasma, they're working on, sharding, they're working on Casper, which is going to make all three of those things that I mentioned before possible. So this is something that plagues the blockchain industry today because, you think about 15 transactions per second, which is what Ethereum, balances around. And then you think about something like Visa, which is 45,000 transactions per second. Well, there's no way that you can build a scalable app on that, to your point. And so until you fix that problem, you have to find a workaround or just wait, right? Because Vitalik Buterin said it himself on Twitter. It's like, if you are trying to build a decentralized application on Ethereum today, like a decentralized Uber or something, where timing and scalability and having a transaction occur right now is important, it's a full stop. Don't do it. You can't do it. So that's why I think part of what we're thinking about is, we're using the blockchain, but we're using the blockchain for something very specific. It's not for the scalability. A lot of our platform will be centralized because the infrastructure of the blockchain today is not there to support scalable, digital content licensing at the level that we want. Potentially in 5 to 10 years, it will be there. Maybe before, I don't know. But it's certainly something that I think warrants a lot of attention and a lot of planning if you're going to build a dApp, right? Because if that dApp relies on transactions that need to happen right now, it's going to be tough to build a dApp. If your dApp relies on transactions that, maybe you could build a queue for, and you could wait 20 minutes, for example, a digital content license to go through on the blockchain, right? I mean, that doesn't need to happen right away. And behind the scenes, you might be able to figure out a way to mitigate some of the scaling risk. We have some thoughts on how to do that. And so we're thinking about that for sure, but I wouldn't even call BitRights a dApp. We're mostly going to be mixing two types of technology, centralized and decentralized, to come up with the best system we can to help content creators in their quest to license more of their work.
Yes, those are excellent points. I think the way you say it is very easy to understand. It's like, without the infrastructure, it's like trying to create Airbnb or Uber in 1995 when the infrastructure of the internet wasn't fully developed. Basically, going in too early is as bad as getting in too late, almost. And again, one more example that I can think of is, I'm from the Philippines, and one of the business models that a lot of people think about is they just look at companies in the U.S. and in more progressive countries, and then they just do the cut and paste model where they bring something from the U.S. to the Philippines. And I think with the earliest franchises of like KFC and like McDonald's, like those didn't work out in the Philippines just because the infrastructure, the demand for fast food, fast meals, and fried chicken and all that good stuff, like it just wasn't there. And you have an excellent point on that.
No, I was just going to say, it's like you don't want to build your house on sand, right? You want to build your house on a solid foundation. If you don't have that, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, or you don't want to build your house like on a cliff either, where there's a lot of erosion. And I keep thinking about Iron Man's house in the Marvel movies because it's so scenic, but it's just really dumb to do that from a geographer's perspective.
That's true.
So I guess this is probably like my final question of the day. It's one of the things that, so I got to know you from a referral by Tao Tao, right? And both of you guys work at Strategic Coin. I like to think of you guys as the premium ICO advisory firm. Can you tell us more about your experience working there and what the biggest lesson you've learned was?
Yeah, sure. So Strategic Coin's been a great experience. I've learned a lot. A lot of the business that Strategic Coin does is in the ICO space. We also do research more generally, thought leadership type of work. That's kind of where I focus more time. But I think that some of the things that I've learned about the ICO process is, every company that comes through the door that I've worked on related to ICOs is taking a little bit of a different approach. The regulatory landscape regarding, issuing your own coin today is so uncertain that it's really hard to it's really hard to do it right, especially if you're going to take U.S. money, because the SEC is particularly stringent about their regulatory rules, and so it's really I think a lot of people who have done ICOs are worried now because of things like this, and we're there when we help clients at Strategic Coin to try and help them think through those problems. So interesting but complicated. I think the other thing I'd say is related to ICOs. A lot of the coins that are being created, right, are dubbed utility coins because they supposedly help you do something on your platform. Well, I think one of the things I've realized is that these utility coins really are potentially a problem not from a regulatory perspective separately, right? They could be a problem from just a product development perspective. If you have a coin that someone needs to buy before coming to your platform, and that's on an exchange, unless you figure out a really easy way to create for that user to purchase the coin, it's going to be another cumbersome friction in the process that you're trying to set up. So you have to find a way to integrate your utility coin directly in your platform, and that's something that I think I've seen be an issue with some ICOs. I think in addition, you have to also worry about, if you have a utility coin, how many people are just going to buy it and hold it. And for that reason, you've done your homework on how much your utility coin should be priced at, right? But if a whole bunch of people start buying it and holding it, the price of your utility coin is going to go up, which means that in order for people to use your platform, your estimations of what your product price used to be are not going to be true. If so many people are holding your coin that the price goes up and people need to pay more to get that coin to use your service, all of a sudden your whole service is more expensive. And that is a problem. So these are types of frictions that I think, like tokenomics, that people haven't thought about yet. Things that I've kind of realized need to be considered when you're creating a coin or you're creating an economy that you're trying to put into this new type of application. It's not as simple as saying, hey, I got a coin now and everyone's going to use it. You got to think of these other things that maybe go into creating your whole service.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think the landscape that we're in, it evolves so fast. Usually technology is usually like 2 steps ahead of regulation, and that makes it very tricky for entrepreneurs, especially if there can be retroactive laws that are passed which are not in favor of the entrepreneurs. So yeah, I totally agree on that. Yeah, so those are all the questions that I have for you today. I just want to thank you again, Chris, so much for your time and your insights. I definitely learned a lot more about digital media, and yeah, hopefully I can, the next time I'm in New York, I can hit you up and learn more about your company and how you guys are doing by then.
I look forward to it. I hope you do.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
All right. Thanks very much, John. Have a great day, and I hope to talk again soon.